Thank you, Jason. Well, thanks everyone for being here. It's great to be with all of you and to talk about where we are and where we're going in this space. And I think one of the take-home messages is, and there's a tip now. Again, it's been 29 years since I thought, we have a problem, and it'll take us more than 20 years to fix it. And now there's a cause, there's a movement, and there are more and more people who understand we really do need to design our economy to be resilient or secure against the known quantum threats. But that's not enough, right? And I never told people it wasn't enough 10, 15 years ago, because it would have reduced the likelihood they would do something. But there's enough momentum, and I think we do need to elaborate upon the true mandate here, which is to create resilient societies, resilient economy, which needs resilient cryptography, amongst other things. And the quantum threat is just this blessing in disguise that shines a light on the market failures and gives us a chance to fix them before it's too late, right? And I think one point, sometimes people think this is all about state actors stealing secrets from other state actors, and most people aren't terribly motivated by that. It's really about just functioning, having critical infrastructures that still work. Availability. I mean, if any critical infrastructure goes down for 2-3 days, it's absolute mayhem. And we've seen it. And these are all in situations where we could detect and remediate within a few days. But if your cryptography is broken, there's no sustainable, credible remediation strategy. So most people couldn't care less about 3 or 4-letter, 5-letter acronyms being broken, but they do want an internet that works. They'd like to still have access to their cloud and so on, and their health systems, hospitals, transportation systems, energy systems, food, still available. And those all directly and indirectly depend on cryptography, public key and symmetric. Though it's the public key that gets crushed, symmetric cryptography generally is considered much more resilient and reliable, especially for long term. And the threat, people are trying to guess Q day, just reframe the conversation to, well, we don't know when Q day, you don't know when a burglar is going to break into your house. You still lock the door, right? You don't say, but when are they going to come? You don't know. You take the precautions. What is your risk tolerance? And then I'll give you a year. And now the risk, if you can, asking the world's experts, I think based on what we heard earlier in this conference, this might even seem conservative to estimate a 5 to 14% chance of this systemic attack being possible in 5 years, might even be viewed by some as conservative. The point is, it's far too large to risk for our more critical systems. We have to be able to say, if this does happen, yeah, bad things will happen, but it's a recoverable event. It'll be a very, very bad, 2030, but it'll be recoverable, just like the pandemic was bad, but we recovered. We still have a lot of work to do to be able to say this will be a recoverable event. Right? Of course, this is sort of the fundamental equation of quantum risk management. The record now, decrypt later is something I really advocated a lot 10, 15 years ago, not because it's the biggest threat or the scariest threat or anything, but it was the earliest threat. It was the threat that if you are concerned about this, you need to start early. But nowadays, and that's still very much the case. You're already late, basically, if you're worried about this. Now I really don't, so we still have to worry about handle and so on. I honestly don't know if the migration time will be finished before the quantum threat timeline. I think there's at least a 10% chance we won't do it in time with very critical consequences, not just a few secrets being lost. Again, we probably will, but 10% is not an acceptable level. And it's only going to go up, right? The more we have the crypto procrastination, as Jaime Gomez likes to call it. And, to be fair, it's not all doom and gloom. While some of us started this as a rogue effort almost 30 years ago, many people, many organizations have been advocating and doing their part, taking the responsibility they have, showing leadership, setting dates communicating with their vendors, and much of the rest of the ecosystem is benefiting from that because a lot of the hard work is being done for them, but not all of it. Okay? But for example, I think all the main critical infrastructures, finance, energy, and so on, should pick their own version of these dates and agree on them. Because Ben Paquin made a lot of wonderful remarks earlier, but the fact, but we don't know when, it's just this excuse to not take action and get organized and catalyze the ecosystem. So pick a date, because it doesn't really, like I said before, it doesn't matter when the burglar is going to try to break into your house. You need to be resilient against that now. So pick dates so then the community can stop philosophizing about exactly when Q Day, as some call it, is going to be. NIST has done a wonderful job, and other standards bodies like ETSI and so on, producing usable standards. They're not your risk managers. A lot of people say, well, I do what NIST tells me. They don't work for you. They're not your risk managers. They produce good standards that you can choose to use, you can ask your vendors to use, and so on. And there's others who've just maybe not even though they didn't have the responsibility, they just stepped up and helped develop best practices, communicate the messages in the language people can understand, and so on, such as the World Economic Forum, FSISAC, Canadian Forum for Digital Infrastructure Resilience, TNO in the Netherlands, and a handful of others, making it a lot easier to get started. And I just want to echo something, Ben also said, it's not like step one is finish your cryptographic inventory and then start doing something about it. Get rid of the rotting corpses right away, and then as you start documenting and looking for the other ones. So it's an evolving process, top-down risk assessment and mitigating right away, and continual building up the cryptographic inventories and maintaining them. They happen in parallel. So one of the excuses, I don't know, if only I knew Q Day. By the time we know Q Day, it's far too late. And the other excuse is, I'm not done my crypto inventory. I'm not sure how to do it. You should be starting right at top-down risk assessment can be done immediately, and the crypto inventory is very complementary to that. And many are doing it, right? And none of these are done, right? But they've taken some of the first steps. There's much more to be done, and it's actually wonderful that they're sharing that they're doing this with everyone else, because it helps catalyze more activity amongst others. Other really low-hanging fruit, talk to your vendors, right? And to make it easier, there's a list of 8 questions, right? And we may update these in the future. Also, your third parties, right? Don't just assume they're going to do what they should do. You have to ask them, this is what I need. Are you going to deliver it? And have a conversation and make sure there's a mutual understanding you're both happy with. But there's now, we've made great success in the last 29 years, 30 years, and more and more people realize we must migrate to algorithms known to be resilient against known threats. In hindsight, this will sound really absurd, that it was this major epiphany and accomplishment to get people to mitigate a known systemic, potentially catastrophic threat. But there we are. But we're getting better. But it's not enough. We've had 2 NIST shortlisted candidates broken by people not even trying to break them on less than a weekend, hours on a laptop. We had another, scare about a year ago, which turned out after 8 days, it was not as again, it wasn't going to break Kyber, but it was going to make us really uncomfortable. Right? So cryptanalysis carries on, right? And it's no longer just a few mathematicians with the computers of the 90s. We're now augmented by AI and quantum computing, where we're still in the early days of quantum cryptanalysis, because we don't even have the large-scale devices to do experimental cryptanalysis, which is a big part of algorithmics and cryptanalysis. So it's absolutely delusional to think we can have some super high degree of confidence that the new public key cryptography is good enough for any application, right? It's never been the case even with before quantum, but I think there's a bit of complacency thinking, if I do what NIST tells me to do, and again, they don't tell you what to do, I'm fine. That's not what anybody's promising. The cavalry is not coming if Kyber is broken, okay? We really need to architect for resilience, right? We need to take, and how do we do that, right? What does it mean to be resilient? We need to be able, so there's something funny about cryptography where we worry about vendor concentration risk. We do supply chain, we study supply chain risk. This is very rigorous and serious if you're in a major enterprise. Your regulators, your board, your customers, they're all super paranoid about this. But the fact that they're all using the same cryptographic algorithms, so it's an insane concentration risk, somehow goes undetected by our risk governance. So we need to fix that while we still can. So it's not a technology problem. It's the way we govern risk that is fundamentally flawed. I think fixable. It's probably not a major change, but we do need to fix it. So you should know what happens if some tool you depend on becomes unreliable. Right? You would do this with anything else. You should do it with your cryptography. You should be able to argue it's recoverable. Right now, I don't think it would be. And you should be able to recover in an appropriate amount of time. So agility is about recovering in an appropriate amount of time. It's not enough. Like agility fairy dust on top of whatever is not enough. You need it. And you got to be careful in terms of how you implement it and where you implement it. But if all your money's gone, your satellites are hijacked, your critical infrastructure is destroyed, your country's been taken over, it's not good enough. It's not a great consolation prize to say, oh, but we'll have new stuff to sell you soon. You need defense in depth to make it a recoverable event. And this is, again, an ancient way to deal with this. And we do it with MFA, right? With authentication, passwords were great for a while, started to be a problem, a bigger problem, and then we knew what to do. You have several different, they have to be different factors. You can't just throw more passwords or bigger passwords. That helps, but the ROI is really not as high as doing a different factor. So that's what we need to do with key exchange. This is not a heretical message. It's always been this way, right? State actors, central banks, they still do pre-shared keys and symmetric cryptography. Just in the 90s, we decided if we want to secure the internet, this PKI stuff is a lot better way to do it. And it was the right bet. But so just like PKI was the way to achieve scalable security in the 90s, symmetric key infrastructure is going to be the way to achieve scalable resilience. And we're going to realize it not in 2 to 3 decades, but in 2 to 3 years, this will become very well understood. So of course we need this post-quantum versus PQC versus QKD discussion is just silly and it doesn't help at all. We absolutely need to migrate to post-quantum public key cryptography ASAP. We need more scalable ways to achieve that extra layer of assurance. That again, some niches do it, but what about the rest of our critical infrastructures? They're absolutely vital. And we need, in the short term, we can immediately deploy more scalable versions of pre-shared key and symmetric key infrastructures. In my company's pioneered one of them. There's this 5 or 6, several in this audience who are doing the same. That's great. There's a whole ecosystem delivering scalable ways to do this. And quantum cryptography is another rapidly maturing way to achieve further diversity and defense in depth. So just to wrap up, just like 29 years ago and even 20, nobody really believed what we were saying. It went from being ridiculed and opposed to being accepted as self-evident. There's going to be, and this is from Manfred Lochte. He was referring to PQC, migration. I'm referring more broadly to the need for cryptographic resilience and cryptographic defense in depth. And it will very quickly migrate to why haven't you done it yet? So let's get ahead of this. And again, the aim here is to allow humanity to boldly and assertively embrace all the positive value creation capabilities of quantum computing and AI without realizing we've mitigated the risk that they'll break the public key cryptography underpinning our economy. Right? That's what we want to do. We're already going to be late for quantum cryptography, but I think we can we can get ahead of it enough and still not unduly slow down our ability to benefit from quantum computing. So thanks a lot for your attention. Enjoy the rest of the conference.